for Ionella Chamber and the Boston City Council's Committee on Planning, Development, and Transportation. My name is Michelle Wu, and I'm chair of this committee. I'm joined by my colleagues, Councillor Frank Baker and Councillor Ed Flynn. I want to remind everyone that this is a public hearing which is being recorded and broadcast live on channels Comcast 8, RCN 82, Verizon 1964, and streaming on the City of Boston website. So if you could please silence your cell phones and other devices, we would appreciate it. Just a reminder that we will take public testimony throughout the hearing, so if you would like to speak, please sign in on the sign-in sheets and check on the sheet that says public testimony. And today's hearing is on dockets number 0545, 0665, and 0970. These matters were sponsored by the mayor and referred to the Committee on Planning, Development, and Transportation. The first docket on March 20th, 2019, the second docket on April 24th, 2019, and the last docket on June 19th, 2019. So just so everyone who's following along will know, I will read the technical language of each of the dockets into the record, then give my colleagues the chance to give a brief opening statement, then go to testimony by our esteemed colleagues from the administration. Docket number 0545, message and order authorizing the City of Boston to accept and expend the amount of $58,916 in the form of a Recreational Trails Program grant awarded by the Massachusetts Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs Department and Conservation and Recreation to be administered by the Boston Transportation Department. The grant will fund additional expenses, fees, and professional services beyond what was originally anticipated for a new accessible gateway and path in the Arnold Arboretum from the Bussey Street Underpass in Roslindale. The second docket, number 0665, message and order authorizing the City of Boston to accept and expend the amount of $250,000 in the form of a grant awarded by the Boston Redevelopment Authority, doing business as the Boston Planning and Development Agency, pursuant to the 135 Morrissey Boulevard Cooperation Agreement. The purpose of this grant is to facilitate planning, design, and capital improvements at and adjacent to the MBTA's JFK UMASS Station. And finally, docket number 0970, message and order authorizing the City of Boston to accept and expend the amount of $260,000 in the form of a grant awarded by the Boston Redevelopment Authority, doing business as the Boston Planning and Development Agency, pursuant to the Winthrop Square Cooperation Agreement, One Post Office Square Cooperation Agreement, and the 15-19 Congress Street Cooperation Agreement. The purpose of this grant is to facilitate planning and design for the Seaport to North Station Rapid Bus Corridor, which was identified in the Go Boston 2030 plan as a key future rapid bus corridor. Okay, thank you for bearing with me. Councillor Baker, would you like to make a statement?
Well, I'm obviously here for the 0665, but looking forward to the other two dockets also. 0665, actually, when I first got involved in politics was because I lived on the other side of JFK Station, and for that neighborhood there, it was always about how do we get over to the water, how do we get to the bike path, the walking paths, those sorts of things. And this grant here will help us to maybe start planning that before the major development plans start to happen. So as the city, we will have maybe a pathway, some sort of plan before we really start getting underway over at UMass and Santander and the Globe site and Center Court. So thank you for this.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. Councillor Flynn?
Thank you, Councillor Wu, and just like Councillor Baker mentioned, I'm also interested in 0665. That location, although it's in Councillor Baker's district, is just outside of my district as well. And on docket number 0970, the bus rapid transit, basically from Seaport to North Station. I'm looking forward to learning more, but advocating on its behalf as well. I think it'll be a great improvement in transportation issues, especially getting people into the South Boston waterfront, and looking forward to hearing more of the details, and keeping my constituents updated on how this will impact them as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn. So we're joined today by three administration representatives. I'm told that Charlotte Fleetwood, Senior Transportation Planner from BTD, will present on the first docket, and then we'll turn it over to Matt Moran from the transit team on the second two. And I do want to also welcome Director Vineet Gupta to the chamber as well, who's not on the hot seat today, but available. Charlotte?
Sure, thank you. So the Arboretum Road Green Link project, it's a connecting path that'll make it possible for people who live on Washington Street near Forest Hill Station to directly get into the Arnold Arboretum through a tunnel at the end of Arboretum Road. And the tunnel right now has trash, it's overgrown, it collects water. So what we want to do is create an accessible path and link it to the Blackwell path. And there's a larger vision to then create a boardwalk and connect it even further into the pathway system in the Arnold Arboretum and eventually to Roslindale Square. But our focus has been first on creating this gateway at the end of Arboretum Road. So we applied to DCR under their UMASS Trails Program, and we received an initial grant at the end of 2018. There is a small plot of land that's owned by the MBTA that we would need to go through, including the area under the tunnel. So we've done a lot of design work on this. The coordination and the right-of-way work with the MBTA has turned out to be a little more complicated than we thought. So we did go back to DCR and ask them for additional funds, and DCR was willing to give us the additional funds. So that's what this is about, this $53,000.
Got it. So just, and I know this is out of the purview technically of this grant, but could you just give an update on what percent design of the entire gateway path and what the funding sources are for the overall project?
Oh, well, for this stretch, we're at, I'd say about 80, maybe closer to 90% design. Mm-hmm. We still need to finalize the paperwork for the right-of-way with the MBTA, and also figure out who's going to manage construction of it, which department, which city department. So we have some work to do on that. The project was awarded CPA funding, $500,000 for construction. We think we're kind of in that ballpark. There is a Green Links line item in the budget. We may need to pull from that line item if the construction is more than $500,000, which it probably will be. The rest of the path, the boardwalks, there's sort of a phase 2, is really more at concept design, and then the stretch from the southernmost portion of the Arnold Arboretum into Roslindale Square is really at slightly less. I'd say it's at a very early concept design stage.
And so far, is there, for phase, so let's just call it phase 2 of the boardwalk, and then phase 3, the southernmost part, for phase 2 and 3, is there funding secured just to finish out the design as well, or anything beyond that, or not even for design?
There's some additional funding, and the neighborhood groups who have been advocating for phase 2 and 3 were able to secure a grant from the Office of Tourism, which they are now directing to us. So I'll be back here asking for an accept and expend for that, and that's an additional $50,000. That's not going to be enough to complete the design, but we're kind of working together to find the funds to complete the design.
How much, what is the design budget for phase 2?
I'm not sure exactly what that is, because I know there's a concept. There's kind of a simple concept, and I think the Arboretum wants to think bigger. Mm-hmm. And so it all kind of depends on what direction it goes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then just to go back really briefly to the MBTA conversation, in terms of paperwork for the right-of-way, is it their barriers on their side, or what would be next steps?
So there's a lease agreement, and they've sent us a draft, and we needed an accurate plan to go with the lease agreement, and that required digging in some right-of-way files to prepare that. So we just received that maybe about 2 weeks ago, and so I've scheduled a meeting with staff from Parks and Public Works to review it and to understand what the options are in terms of who would sign the lease and whoever signs the lease, which department would then be required to maintain, the path. So the amount of right-of-way required for this Phase 1 is very small. But as you get into the later phases, it's a bit larger. So it will probably be more of a conversation.
And is there any financial component to the lease?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
And likely the city of Boston, whatever department it ends up being, will be maintaining it in some form?
Well, we would, I think, seek a partnership. I know the Arnold Arboretum has been willing to assume maintenance of anything that falls within the Arnold Arboretum, and they've also said the tunnel portion they're willing to maintain as well. So that Phase 1 seems to be, it's pretty worked out.
Okay.
The additional phases need more discussion.
And you said the last outstanding piece was who will manage construction? Is the city's preference for the city to do it, or is the city's preference for the MBTA?
I think for legal reasons, and we've kind of looked at it every which way, it needs to be overseen by the city. That's what we've been told.
Okay. And so you're just hoping or pushing for them to agree to that?
Yeah, either Parks or Public Works to agree to oversee construction, for us to figure out how we can staff that and how we can do that.
Okay. But it's not an issue of the MBTA being an obstacle on that
No.
decision? Great, okay. Do my colleagues have questions on the first grant? Councilor Baker?
So, thank you, Madam Chair. The professional services that they're paying for to continue the planning of it and legal work with this 58,000?
Yes, we have a design contract with Horsley Witten, and they've been working with us on the final design plans for Phase 1. They've also been working with the Arnold Arboretum and the community groups on the Phases 2 and 3.
Yeah, so in the CPA money, the 500,000, will that pay for the job, or is it a larger job than 500,000?
We need a final cost estimate. The last cost estimate was around 700,000. So we think with the CPA funds and with money from the Green Links line item, which is 300,000 per year, we would have enough to move forward with construction.
Good. I'm okay.
Thank you. Any questions from Councilor Flynn?
Thank you, Councilor Wu. The only question I had, can you talk a little about how this will impact persons with disabilities and ensuring their access to and from the areas as well?
Yes, this would be accessible. Yes, an accessible route.
What changes would take place that would make it even more accessible for persons with disabilities, and are there any obstacles that you foresee?
The biggest challenge right now, it's not paved. It's just kind of mud. So the biggest challenge is to create a paved path through the tunnel, and the MBTA doesn't want us to do too much digging. So that's been the challenge, is to try to make sure that we don't that we keep the excavation to a minimum, but that we can also meet the grades so that the path is accessible.
So the pathway underneath, how would someone in a wheelchair navigate that?
So it would be at a gradual enough slope that a person in a wheelchair would be able to navigate it. It would meet the guidelines for grades and for smoothness, of the material.
Any potential challenge as it relates to the, downpouring of rain and what impact that would have on the passageway and those trying to navigate the passageway through with the wheelchair?
Yeah, I mean, we are designing drainage, more of a passive drainage for the path. So the portion that goes under the tunnel would be paved, and then it would meet up with a stabilized soil path. So which is similar to the Blackwell path and some of the other paths in the Arnold Arboretum now, and those are handicap accessible. If we had a very large rainstorm, I think, for anyone, the path might become a little bit, probably a little less comfortable. But it would be designed to meet the standards, and we are working on, with the Parks Department and with Boston Water and Sewer, to provide drainage into the catch basins where they exist. So in the area of the tunnel, there is a catch basin, and we can guide the stormwater to it. Once you get through the tunnel and to the other side, into the Arnold Arboretum, it's more of passive flow into like a sand filter rain garden. So.
Thank you. I'm glad water and sewer are part of the discussion in Public Works.
Yes.
As well, because I see so many times when there's a major rainstorm, the rain is collected almost at various intersections, and I also see seniors, I also see persons with disabilities trying to navigate the crosswalk where the big rain puddle is at.
Yes.
And they have a difficult time navigating it. So going forward, can we make sure we include water and sewer in Public Works? But could we also ask the Mayor's Commission on Persons with Disabilities to weigh in a little bit, just to
Yes.
make sure it looks good,
Yep.
and it will be accessible, and it's something that the Persons with Disabilities Commission approves of as well?
Yes, they've reviewed the designs, and I mean, your point is very well taken, that one of the reasons we chose Horsley Witten to do the design for this is because stormwater management is one of their areas of expertise. So it will not only have to look nice and park-like, but it will have to meet all of the stormwater requirements, and so that's, it's a really big issue, so it's a good question. Yeah,
And thank you for your great work on this project.
thank you.
Great. Charlotte, is there anything else that the council should know about this grant or the project?
No, I think that's all.
Okay, thank you very much for your time. We will shift now to Matt and Morrissey Boulevard. Councilor Baker, did you have any framing statement on this?
No, I'd like to hear from Matt.
Okay. Thanks, Matt.
So, good morning, councilors. Thank you for hosting us today. Before I begin about JFK, I just wanted to give a brief overview of the new PTD transit team. We were formed in February of this year, and the mission was to provide better coordination between the MBTA, MassDOT, and the city on transit enhancements. And to that end, we've been working on a number of projects across the city to improve transit access and transit reliability. So this is one piece of sort of that overall puzzle. So again, thank you for taking time to speak with us today about JFK UMASS Station. As you noted, this is grant money from 135 Morrissey Boulevard, the former Boston Globe site, which we are hoping to use for a transportation action plan for JFK Station and the area around it. As transportation is key to the future success of Columbia Savin Hill and surrounding neighborhoods, we are planning to analyze access to JFK UMass Station and the public realm around the site in partnership with other city agencies, MassDOT, the MBTA, and of course, the community. This will help to prep JFK and the surrounding neighborhood for the future. It was identified in Go Boston 2030 as a key connection from several new bus corridors, and also prepared for climate change, and finally to prepared for future development, which we believe will be happening around the station. The scope of the project, or the study I should say, is to build on past planning initiatives. There have been a number of planning efforts that have happened in this area, but without very concrete designs, and we hope to sort of build on those efforts to produce concrete designs. The Columbia Point Master Plan is one, Go Boston 2030 is of course another. There is a proposal for infraspace, so to improve the area underneath I-93 with better accommodations for people with disabilities, better open space, and of course coordinating with efforts that are ongoing on Morrissey Boulevard. Of course, we're looking to enhance the pedestrian connection. That's another major element of this. The bike and pedestrian connection to the station can be lacking at times, and we want to make sure that that connection is something that works well for all users of the transportation network. And finally, transit connections. So working closely with MassDOT and the MBTA, we'll seek to enhance the transit network at JFK UMass Station itself and the bus network reaching JFK UMass Station. The goal of the study, two goals, will be to create a series of immediate action items. So what can we do in the next 6 months to a year to improve the surrounding neighborhood, but also improve the station? and secondly, to create a menu of enhancement items so that when additional state money, city money, or developer money comes available, we can use that money to start to make some of these enhancements reality. And of course, this will be done in very close coordination with the surrounding community. So Columbia's Haven Hill Civic Association and other key stakeholders in the area. And just one example of an initiative that we hope to study as a part of this process is the connection from Sydney Street to JFK Station itself. So as you might know, to connect from Sydney Street, you need to walk underneath I-93. It's not a great walk today. It's sort of, you're always in shadows. It's not well lit. The signage isn't great. And very importantly, it's not ADA accessible. You have to walk up a very, very steep flight of stairs, which can be treacherous for somebody carrying groceries, as can be for obviously somebody with disabilities. So we hope to look at that connection and understand through design, through better lighting, through better signage, what we can do to enhance that connection. And that would just be one example of a project that we would hope to focus on. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt. Councilor Baker.
Thank you, Matt. So this transit team will obviously, well, not obviously, but remain in place when all of the development starts to happen, the UMASS, Santander, Capitol, Center Court. So is it your team or you that will be the eyes on, well, that will be our connection when we get into Kosciuszko Circle and places like that?
That's a complicated question, of course. But there'll probably be a number of different transportation staff people who are involved with these initiatives. So from the BPDA, the community planning side, and the transportation planning side, the BPDA, they'll be closely involved with these initiatives, and we'll be working closely with them on this initiative as well. My colleague, Pat Hoey, from BTD, is the neighborhood planner from BTD for Dorchester. So I'll be coordinating very closely with him. And any sort of series of recommendations that come out of this will be a collaborative effort between BTD, Public Works, BPDA, as I mentioned before, our state partners. Because
we also have Moakley Park being done over also, so there's a real need for the city to have, I believe, a point person for just this area. I know I'm a little off topic with this money here. Let's get back to that. So this is $250,000 from mitigation from the Globe, and they've only paid into it $250,000 now. They got this at the issuance of permits, correct?
Correct.
And there's another $250,000 coming in when they get their certificate of occupancy.
Correct.
Okay. Do we have any sense of where that money will go? Can that money go towards some of these improvements that we come up with in the RFP?
Certainly. So the money was identified, and I'd have to reread the language of the original grant, but I believe it was identified to go towards community groups and transportation enhancements in and around sort of the Boston Globe site. So certainly, if there were enhancements identified through that process, we could put some of that money to work.
And is the RFP available yet?
It has been, we haven't issued it yet. The goal was to get the council approval on this grant money first before issuing the RFP.
And that RFP will be available online?
Exactly, yes.
Okay. Are we looking at, will the scope of this RFP get into Kosciuszko Circle at all, like just looking at it, or more this side of Kosciuszko Circle?
I think it's more the neighborhood side of K Circle.
Okay.
Given how complex that process is and sort of the work going on with Moakley Park, I think it's maybe best left to those efforts, but we'll certainly coordinate with those teams.
Okay, I think I'm good.
Thanks, Councilor Baker. Councilor Flynn.
Thank you, Councilor Wu, and thank you for your testimony here today. I just wanted to follow up on a couple points Councilor Baker made. I know it's not a focus of, Moakley Park per se, but what type of access will there be from the train station to Moakley Park for persons with disabilities? Is that being factored in?
Yeah, certainly. So we'll be working closely with our colleagues in the Commission for Disabilities on this entire process. So the goal will be to make every aspect of JFK UMASS Station fully ADA accessible based on current ADA standards. So To your specific question about the access from the station to the park, we'll certainly be looking at sort of the walkway that exists now and understanding how we can make the walkway more accessible based on current ADA standards.
When you are considering that, and you do a site visit, could I join you? Because I know it is very challenging for seniors and for persons with disabilities to get from JFK Station to Moakley Park. There's a lot of roads that the cars are going by so fast. Some of the crosswalks are not pedestrian safety is an issue. So it's not just the JFK area, it's going out towards Moakley Park as well. That is also a challenge for many.
Certainly. Yeah, we will, when we schedule the site walk, we'll make sure to notify your office. We'd love to have you for that.
Thank you for your leadership and thank you for your testimony.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn. So just to make sure I understand the scope of this current $250,000, you said it's to have a vendor come in, a consultant come in and help with the transportation action plan. And so will that $250 also be used for the items that come out of the first part of the list that you meant, the immediate action items for the next 6 to 12 months? Will it pay for those too? Or will there need to be additional funding to pay for even that first batch of immediate steps?
Sure. So I think the hope is that there will be some tangible elements that come out of this process to pay for some of those initial items. Some of them could come out of existing city MBTA and state resources, and some of them could be larger capital items that might come out of funding that the state has available through other means, or the city has available through other means. But the goal would be through this study is to create a series of plans and a series of designs that could aid in understanding the costs and the sort of design needs for the area around the station.
Okay, so the entirety of this $250 is just for the plan to be done and not any of so anything that comes out of this 6 to 12 month action item list will be from other city sources or state sources?
Primarily, yes.
Okay. And then, let's say you mentioned the issue of the stairs going into the station after you go under the highway. I mean, even the stairs themselves are crumbling, pieces coming out. So if the plan likely says, we need to have major changes in this entryway or entrance point to the station, is the MBTA already willing to, is it in any of their plans now to address that? Do they have funding set aside for what will be larger capital improvements?
So they're at the table with us. So I think they're going to be working with us on this study. They've already committed to doing that, and they will, through the outcomes of this study, be able to determine what the proper accessibility enhancement would be. Would it be a ramp? Would it be an elevator? And then we would be able to identify the costs, and that could be then programmed into the 5-year capital plan.
So you think that they're committed to making some changes to the station within the next 5 years after following this plan?
Based on the conversations we've had, they seem very open to it, yes.
Okay, great. And then can you talk a little bit about the climate portion of it and how you'll be thinking about flooding and all that with this planning?
Certainly. So the MBTA has already done a fair amount of work looking at sort of the inundation points around JFK Station and understanding what the impacts of those would be. So what we'll be doing is looking at enhancements that could not only help the station, but help the surrounding neighborhood survive and get through a flooding event. I'm not really a sort of expert on this area, but it'll be certainly something that we write into the scope and make sure that the consultant who we hire has the expertise to be able to properly evaluate with us.
Okay, and then my last question, can you just talk about the timeline again? So when will the consultant be hired and starting, and then when will the results of the study be done back?
Sure. So the goal is to have a scope out in the next 4 to 6 weeks. It needs a bit more internal review, and it needs a legal review. And then once that happens, we can, we'll sort of have a typical 90-day timeline to sort of get back consultant selection, RFP responses rather, and then we'll be able to sort of evaluate and award. My hope is that we could have this finished by the end of next year, if all goes well.
Okay.
But if there's immediate action items along the way that we discover through the community process, through the technical analysis, we'll certainly look to do those sooner than that.
Sorry, my last question.
Sure.
Do you anticipate a certain number of community meetings within that, this will be now, 6 to 8 month process? Is it, you'll do it in different places, or will you kind of leave that up to the consultant to plan out?
So I think we'd look for advice from the consultant to help us plan that out. I think regular check-ins with the area civic associations on a probably quarterly basis would be sort of one first step, but then we would also have individual meetings that just focus on this project through the process. I would imagine a minimum of 3.
Okay. More about the breakdown?
Thanks again, Matt. And so that process, as the RFP goes out and we've identified someone that will come in and help us, that will start with the community.
Exactly.
Yeah, with walkthroughs and also the RFP will stay within the parameters of the agreement from the IAG on 135 Morrissey Boulevard, correct?
Exactly. So the co-op agreement with the BPDA sort of has spelled out a series of requirements for this grant money, and we'll certainly stay within sort of those confines as we're spelled out.
Okay. And again, one more time, when will the RFP be available, do you think, 4 to 6 weeks?
That would be my hope, yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm good.
Are you good, Councilor Flynn? Okay. So I know there were 2 folks signed up to testify that I believe were on this docket rather than the next one. So it would be great. I had Donna Blythe McColgan signed up and Don Walsh. So, and if anyone else wants to speak on this one, or if Donna, feel free, you can come up to the public microphones. Oh, all 3 could go up, one after another. One at a time. If you could, or you could pass one word at a time too. We're up for anything here. If you could please identify yourself and your address for the record.
Yes,
Thank you, Donna.
Thank you. My name's Donna Blythe McColgan. I live at 203 Savin Hill Avenue. I'm a lifelong resident of Savin Hill in the city. And I want to thank the councilors for this hearing. I also want to thank our district councilor for his diligence in getting this matter to the forefront and bringing it to the community. I want to stand here and thank a councilor from South Boston who also has familiarity, and we need to work together on this. And we in the community are paying close attention to what's happening here. And I won't speak for anyone else here, but I support an RFP that's going to first go to the community for input. I think, too, that we need to be comprehensive and look at all development that's going on and not piecemeal, and I think that's becoming quite a theme for the community. So I'm not taking a position at this point now, but I do support an RFP that is involved with the community, that has the interest of the community, and also meets the agreement that was set up, which I was not involved in, between the Beat and the community and Councilor Baker. So I want to thank you for this time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can I just respond to that?
Sure.
Yeah, Donna, so this here, I would, in my head, would be the start of a working group that when this is just the first development that's here, so this structure that we're setting up here, I'm hoping will help us in the planning of UMass and everything else with Kosciuszko Circle, and of course we have Wynn on the other side, and we have the Joe Moakley Park on the other side. So I'm hoping that this group that gets together on this initial RFP, we're going to be able to keep together city and state people that will be identified and have knowledge of this area. So I'm hoping that this is just the start of a longer planning thing.
Thank you, Councilor. So am I. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Don Walsh. I live in Savin Hill Avenue. And I think I can say I'm representing the Community Benefits Committee of the Columbia Savin Hill Civic Association. We've talked about it at the membership meeting for months and months and months, and we just had a formal working committee on Tuesday, and I'm authorized to say the following. I'll say more, but at least what I'm authorized to say is, following exactly what Frank said, is that we estimate there's 10,000 new units of housing coming online in and around Columbia Savin Hill Civic Association. That's unbelievable. That's an unbelievable number for, you know, not downtown Boston, not Manhattan, for those of us living in Columbia Savin Hill area to see 10,000 housing units. And we are not at the point where we're opposing that, but we are at the point formally where we're saying, wait a minute, how are we planning for that? What's the traffic impacts going to be? And so far, we've only, as a committee, you know, democracy's top, as a committee, all we've agreed on is the traffic impacts. We got a whole bunch of individual interests that have got, you know, we're doing some little bit of skirmishing on some of the rest of them. But I think the message today, I think Donna used the word comprehensive plan. Frank has talked about, this is, I assume, starting a planning process that doesn't stop with the beach. Because, you know, the piecemeal approach to development and planning, which is what I have seen traditionally, isn't going to work. It's just simply not going to work with 10,000 units. We have to step back, pull the city together, and then you have the big battle of pulling not only the state, but DCR as well as the state, because Morrissey Boulevard is DCR. I don't know if they talk with DOT. I really have some questions about that. But I think at least again, the Betterment Savin Hill, Columbia Savin Hill Community Benefits Committee wants to formally put on your agenda, or put a request in, is that we use this as an initial stage of wrapping our arms around the combined impacts of the, again, 10,000 units of housing that are going to be coming online at some point. Thank you.
Thank you, Don.
And just for clarification, I think where Donnie's talking about the 10,000 units would be from the Glover's Corner Planning Initiative, which is Freeport Street, all the way over to the Wind Development, and then the UMASS and everything in the middle there. So,
And they're all
thank you,
going to go on
Donnie.
Morrissey Boulevard and Kosciuszko Circle.
Thank you, Donnie.
I'm Michael Taubenberger, and I live at 201 Savin Hill Avenue, and thank you for considering this planning grant for the infrastructure improvements in this area. I'd like to make a point that before we start to develop a plan for how we can improve that, the various transportation and pathways and et cetera in the neighborhood, we really need to know what the impact is going to be from these developments that Don had mentioned, 10,000 up to 10,000 units of housing, all the commercial development, the retail development, the development in Moakley Park, et cetera, what's the impact on all of those going to have? So as these projects start to come through the planning stage and the approval stage, that we in the community have some information available to us that we can make an informed decision on. If we don't know what the impacts are, and if someone's coming up and saying, well, you know, here's a bunch of improvements that can be made, but we won't know whether the impacts that these projects are going to have, whether or not the improvements that are going to be put forward are actually going to really address the impact that these projects are going to have. So, circle back, I think it's really important for us to do the assessments, to do the analysis on what's the impact on all these developments in a comprehensive way. And it's not just transportation, it's, you know, it's water and sewer, it's the electrical grid, it's the, you know, it's everything that they're going to be drawing on, including, you know, what's the construction mitigation going to be for the phasing on these projects. You can't have them all going all at once. Morrissey Boulevard will be completely shut down if that happens. So just encourage as much as possible to include that impact analysis as part of this. I'm not sure whether you're going to get that for $250,000 if you're really looking at coming up with plans for actually improving it. Where's the analysis going to come from?
Mm-hmm.
That's
Matt, could you speak to that?
Yeah, sure. So I can say there's already been a fair bit of analysis done about sort of the development in this area through the development projects themselves, Plan Glover's Corner. And so I think we already have a lot of data that we can start to reference. And so when we go and we sort of start an existing conditions analysis, that'll be a key part of the existing conditions analysis, is to understand what development is in the pipeline and what impact that will have on sort of the infrastructure in the area, especially, as I said before, about, JFK Station itself.
So those 10,000 new units will explicitly be part of, contemplated in how this plan, the starting point for this plan?
Exactly. All the known development will be a starting point in this plan.
And just one final comment. As these projects move forward in the planning and approval stage, there are agreements that get made, that gets signed with the city or with the BPDA. It would be great if the community could have access to those, to actually see what these agreements say, so that we can also make more informed decisions on what public benefits we could suggest that get funded from this pool of money. If we don't know what the payment stream is, if we see, well, there's $20 million or there's $40 million out there, but we don't know that money's not going to come in year one or year two, it gets paid in over a 10-year period or a 20-year period. What can get funded with that money is completely different than what we may assume can get funded from it. So having the community have a copy of those agreements would be very helpful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so
Are
much.
those available online, Matt?
I believe they are.
Payment agreements, so you would go to a project and look at BPDA, and that would have the agreements and where the payments and everything are?
I believe so. If you go to the BPDA website, if you type in 135 Morrissey Boulevard, the co-op agreement should be online.
No, but
Okay, that would be helpful.
yeah, and then
wasn't aware of
moving
that.
forward, as other projects come
that'd be great.
along, they'll all be available.
That'd be great. Thank you so much, Councilor.
Thank you. Councilor Flynn?
Yeah, thank you, Councilor Wu, and I just had one question or comment. As it relates to Kosciuszko Circle, with so much development taking place in and around that area, Savin Hill into South Boston, Mary Ellen, McCormick, is there a master transportation plan specifically for that circle, a traffic plan, a safety plan? If we're putting 10,000 more units in and around that area, just in Dorchester, we're going to add more in South Boston that will use that same rotary. Do we know how many more vehicles that rotary can take? That, as it relates to making sure that safety is considered, transportation is considered, people are able to cross the street. How much more can that small circle take with all this development taking place?
Sure. So through this study, we'll certainly be looking at the pedestrian safety elements in that circle. With that said, I think that circle is a much bigger question that really needs DCR and MassDOT to come to the table, to your point.
But could we ask for almost like a master plan specifically on that circle itself? With so much development happening right now, you almost need city, state, and maybe even federal to come together to design a master plan just on that circle, because it's so critical to South Boston, so critical to Dorchester and Roxbury and the South End. It connects a lot of these neighborhoods. Bayside is developing and UMass is developing. You almost need a specific master plan, transportation plan just on that circle, I would think.
It's a little outside the scope of what we're going to be looking at.
Okay.
But certainly,
Can I speak to that,
please,
Madam
yeah.
Chair?
Yes, please.
So the way I kind of look at this, Eddie, is when the soccer stadium was floated, there was a commitment made by the state for $100 million towards Kosciuszko Circle improvements there. So I think our job, you and I, would be to make sure that commitment is, when the UMass site starts to happen, we have to be persistent in bringing that topic back up, that the $100 million was there. Mm-hmm. And as far as plans for Kosciuszko Circle, there has been some, like, I know around the time we were going through the Olympics, there were some plans there then, and I'm sure they can we can find some as a jumping off point, but that would be, you know, if the UMass development is a 20-year thing, we should, like in that first phase or so, know what's going to happen with Kosciuszko Circle, because the reality is if Kosciuszko Circle doesn't get taken care of, on my side of the city, we'll be stuck there.
Yes.
So it's you know, I don't think we have a choice. You know, if the development's going to move forward, then we as electeds are going to need to step up and make sure we're at the state and at the federal level asking for help in this. So.
Could you come to the microphone just so we can get it on record?
I'm speaking for myself, not the Civic Association at this point. But so I've looked at that, and I've estimated $40 million in community benefits associated with all the development that's going around Columbia Savin Hill. What are we going to do with $40 million? Now, I understand you've got a major issue dealing with the state, 2 branches of the state. Federal government should absolutely be involved. I don't see that coming together the way Frank's talking about. I don't see it coming together yet. And a big question is how you're going to fund it. And I'm going to go back to $40 million in community benefits. I mean, it seems to me that it's to all of our advantage, not only those of us who live in the Savin Hill area, Columbia area, South Boston, all the institutions in BC High and UMass, that Kosciuszko Circle gets straightened out. But no one wants to take full ownership or spend the money to do it. And so that's what we're hopefully coming from the Civic Association. I don't care who fix it. I pay city, state, and federal taxes. I want somebody to fix it. But before you fix it, you got to study it. And before you study it, you got to get the right team together, and it's got to include the state and everybody else. And you know, we've been talking with Frank along this direction. We want to support that. But again, I see hanging out there $40 million.
Thank you. Okay, any other thoughts on this particular grant? Okay, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Then Matt, could you take us through the last grant?
Certainly. So moving across the city to the Seaport to North Station corridor. So this was identified in Go Boston as a key future rapid bus corridor. So this corridor will connect the north side commuter rail lines, the orange line, the green line, and the blue line to the fast-growing employment and residential community in the South Boston waterfront Seaport district. Go Boston 2030 identified this connection as an important corridor for future transit enhancements. Currently, access to the Seaport is limited to South Station, the Silver Line, and local buses. All riders originating on the orange line, green line, and north side commuter rail lines must transfer at least twice to get to this growing community. This reduces the connectivity of this important neighborhood to regional job and population centers. So we are proposing a action plan to study this and hope to bring a consultant on board who can help us with the community process and also the design for this. So the scope, we are going to be looking at streets and bus stations. So we're going to evaluate sort of the streets and bus stations in downtown Boston and the South Boston waterfront Seaport to determine the corridor routing, station stops, and key transfer points. The study will also examine key bike and pedestrian connections along the route and pedestrian connections to future stations. We're going to be looking at bus service options, so working closely with the MBTA and MassDOT, looking at providing a better and more direct rapid bus connection between these two locations and points between. And of course, we're going to be coordinating with complementary planning efforts, of which there are several. So the BPDA's downtown planning study and the South Boston Seaport Transit Strategic Plan are two important studies that we'll be coordinating with closely on this. And of course, we will be looking at having a comprehensive public engagement process as part of the study. So study goals, we're looking at having some immediate action items to enhance the bus service through downtown Boston, either to the Seaport or from the Seaport and coming from the north side. And then the second goal will be to create a design for a near-term implementation of a rapid bus connection between North Station and the Seaport. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilor Baker?
I'm good, thank you.
Councilor Flynn?
Thank you, Councilor Wu, and thank you to Matt again. I guess my question or comment, I know you're going to study potential routes from North Station to the South Boston waterfront. What are you going to look for as you study those routes? What is your top issue you want to see connecting North Station to the South Boston waterfront?
Sure. So I think it's really going to be looking at travel time and reliability, those two things. So for transit users right now, we'll be looking at sort of the time it takes, and we know the time it takes, right, to get from the North Station area into the South Boston waterfront. So the key determinant that we'll be looking at is what can improve that travel time and what can improve the reliability. Because if you're coming from North Station today, having to make 2 transfers to get to the Seaport is not only time consuming, but it's also a reliability issue. Also, this will help to mitigate any population or job growth that's straining existing MBTA resources and roadway capacity through having this better bus connection.
So would this bus lane connect MBTA stops along the bus route, such as Tufts Medical or State Street or Park Street or Downtown Crossing? Are you connecting North Station? Are you connecting these MBTA stops, pickups, basically, to go to the waterfront?
So that would be the goal, is to identify where there would be key transfer points along the way. So the goal would be to look at, what connections make the most sense given the existing street layout and where we know people are going to and coming from.
Okay. I support bus lanes to help move our workforce through areas where bottlenecks occur. At a hearing here with the MBTA earlier this year on better buses, I advocated for a short bus lane underneath the expressway, Traveler Street, a 2-way street, to accommodate a short bus lane. So for me, the community process placement is key to make sure our workforce can get to one place to another to avoid traffic jams. Can you talk about the community engagement process that you're going to undertake as part of this?
Sure. So it's going to be a combination of meetings that are dedicated to this study. So we'll be, of course, hosting 2 to 3 public meetings with the communities along the corridor to make sure that everyone is fully informed and understands and can provide input into the planning effort, and then when we get to the design effort, the design alternatives. The second thing that we'll hope to do is incorporate sort of discussion of this into existing planning efforts. So the South Boston Seaport Strategic Transit Plan, making sure that that is part of the discussion for those public meetings and plan downtown. And then if there's requests from any civic associations or other stakeholders, we'll certainly be very open and willing to meet with those individuals, either at existing meetings or through breakout sessions.
And how far would you envision the bus route would go into the South Boston waterfront? Do you expect it to go all the way into the Flint Industrial Park, or do you envision it to stop around certain areas of Seaport Boulevard, or do you have to take a survey of the workforce down there to see what really benefits the workers?
Exactly. I think it's really, to your point, what works best in terms of enhancing mobility, enhancing travel time. So, and then the second thing will be through the community process and the design process, understanding what the proper location is to have bus lanes or have bus service continue. It's potentially also providing a good transfer point to the Silver Line. If that continues into the Flint Industrial Park, it could potentially be a good transfer to that service. So I think we'd look at a few options.
And then my last question will be brief, but would you be connecting North Station with the Convention Center, BCEC?
I think we would have to, through the design and community process, understand what route makes the most sense. But that would certainly be a good enhancement, is that ability to get more seamlessly from North Station in the North Station area down towards the Convention Center and the World Trade Center.
Yeah, the World Trade Center. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn. So Matt, is a starting point for this that you'll anticipate that you're starting from the sort of assumption that dedicated bus lanes will be a planned outcome, or is that even a consideration of whether that will happen?
I think dedicated bus lanes are a key consideration. So we want to understand what the impacts will be to the pedestrian environment, the biking network, the vehicular network, but I think ensuring reliability and travel time savings will potentially require some dedicated bus lanes, yes.
And how is this interacting with all the private shuttles? I mean, many that are already running. I think there must be a bunch that run from North Station already into the Seaport, South Boston waterfront area.
So we're in close coordination with the Seaport TMA on the shuttle network, and I think the goal of having a good, reliable, rapid bus connection is that many of those shuttles wouldn't have to operate because we would now be making that connection through a good public transit option. With that said, I think we'd look for partnerships where partnerships make sense. So potentially providing some space and lanes for shuttles that make connections which the public option or the public transit route doesn't make.
Okay, on that point, I just want to continue emphasizing, as I have at other meetings, I don't think it's acceptable that corporate private shuttles should get priority access to the lanes and special high speed, priority so that they can go faster if they're not open to the general public. And I think it's on the city to kind of put that choice to them that if they want to use these lanes, great for their workers, but they should just make sure that other people can get on as well, residents from the Fort Point, Seaport area, and others in Boston.
Certainly.
And then so in terms of the $260,000, again, this will be, the entire amount is for a consultant to create a plan, and any of the immediate action items or changes would come from other funding sources?
Exactly. So the MBTA, through the Better Bus process, has funds that are allocated for municipalities, and they've indicated a strong desire to see this connection and to use some of that funding towards this connection.
Okay. Great. Is there anything else that we should know about this grant?
Not right now. I don't think so.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments or questions from my colleagues? No. Okay. Thank you both so much. Thank you, Vineet, also. Is there anyone else who wishes to testify? Neil? No? Okay. This will conclude our hearing on dockets number 0545, 0665, and 0970. I want to thank everyone for coming. This hearing is adjourned.
Thank you.